I'd been coming to the same corner coffee shop for months without thinking much about it. It wasn't special: fluorescent lights, scratched wooden tables, the low hiss of the espresso machine. I liked it because nobody here knew me well enough to ask how I was. That Tuesday morning the place smelled like burnt toast and rain on pavement. My phone sat face down on the table, still showing the last unsent text to a girl I'd stopped seeing weeks ago. I kept meaning to delete it, but my thumb always hovered, then pulled back. She was behind the counter, rinsing out the metal milk pitchers. Mid-40s, maybe a little older. She wasn't supposed to be there. This was usually staffed by college kids. I'd noticed her the week before, just once, handing out orders like she belonged. "Flat white, right?" she asked when she saw me in line. Not a question so much as a memory. I nodded. "Yeah, thanks." She gave a small smile but didn't hold it. It slipped off her face like she'd caught herself. Her hands moved quickly, wiping the steam wand, folding a napkin into a triangle before setting my cup on it. I sat at my usual table near the window. Rain tapped the glass, soft and steady. She came out from behind the counter to wipe the next table, pausing as if to check if the cloth had done its job. "Slow morning," she said, not looking at me. "Guess so," I replied. My voice came out quieter than I meant. She turned then, just for a second. Her eyes flicked to my phone, then back to me. "You're here a lot." "Yeah. Habit, I guess." I tried to smile, but ended up pressing my thumb along the edge of my cup instead. She didn't answer, just nodded and went back behind the counter. I watched the back of her head while she filled the pastry case. Her hair pulled into a loose knot, a few strands falling against her neck. I told myself I was only noticing because she'd remembered my order. But later, when she came by to clear a nearby table, she looked at me again and said, "You don't talk much, do you?" I blinked. "Not really." "You." A corner of her mouth lifted. "Depends on who's asking." She set the plates on her tray and left before I could think of a reply. I stared at the napkin she'd left under my cup. The triangle had unfolded slightly, one edge curling up as if reaching. I pressed it flat with my palm and felt ridiculous. The bell above the door jingled. Someone else came in. I kept my head down, scrolling my phone, but the unsent text was still there. I opened a blank one instead and typed, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I didn't send it. When I finally looked up, she was gone. A different barista was at the counter, younger, distracted. My cup had gone cold. I stood to leave and saw a small slip of paper under the saucer, probably meant for the kitchen. My name, or something like it, was scribbled at the top in her handwriting. Beneath it, a time and a place I didn't recognize. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I folded the note, put it in my pocket, and walked away, not sure if I was meant to show up or pretend I'd never seen it. I waited 3 days before going. The slip of paper had only an address. No name, no explanation. I checked it twice online. It was an old 3-story building near the park, the kind with peeling paint and wrought iron balconies. By the third evening, I couldn't sit in the coffee shop anymore without feeling like I'd missed something. So I went. The hallway smelled faintly of lemons and old carpet. Her door was already open, a thin chain holding it in place. She appeared when I knocked, wearing a gray sweater with the sleeves pushed up, hair looser than before. "You found it," she said, not quite smiling. I wasn't sure if I should. Most people don't. She unhooked the chain and stepped aside. "Come in." Inside was small but warm. Stacks of books on the floor, a kettle on the stove, one window cracked open to the sound of passing cars. I noticed a pair of men's boots by the door, but they looked old, dusty, like they hadn't been worn in years. She poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs. "I own the building," she said, sliding one mug toward me. "Top floor's empty right now. I was up there fixing a leak when you walked in last week. Thought you might be someone who'd appreciate the quiet." I took the mug. "I do. Too much, probably." She sat across from me, elbow resting on the table. "I'm Lena." "Ethan," I said, though she must have known from the rent checks. We sat there a moment, the kettle clicking as it cooled. I don't usually invite tenants in, she said finally. My son, he's about your age, says I should keep boundaries. Does he live here? No. College out of state. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Divorced a long time ago. Something in her tone made me lower my eyes. I didn't mean to. It's fine. She gave a small, quick shrug. You didn't ask. I took a sip of tea. It tasted faintly of mint, slightly bitter. My mind flickered with the image of her folding that napkin, of her eyes catching mine in the shop. You always sit in the same spot, she said. By the window. Do you ever talk to anyone there? Not really. Why? I shrugged. Easier not to. She studied me, not unkindly. You're young. You're supposed to be out doing things. I was, I said, and surprised myself by adding, before she left. Her eyebrows lifted a little, but she didn't push. Sometimes people leave, she murmured, like she was speaking to herself. Sometimes they come back different. The kettle ticked again. Outside a car horn blared, then faded. I don't know why you remembered my order, I said. She smiled faintly. It was the way you waited. Like you weren't sure you were allowed to order. People like that stick in my head. Her words landed softer than they should have. I felt my chest tighten, a mix of gratitude and something sharper. We drifted into silence. She picked at a loose thread on her sweater. I traced the rim of my mug with a fingertip, thinking how easily the line between kindness and intimacy blurs. Does your son know you still work the counter? I asked. She shook her head. He'd tell me to stop. Says it's embarrassing. A small laugh escaped. But I like the rhythm. And sometimes, she stopped, eyes flicking up at me. Sometimes I like seeing who's still trying. The air felt heavier. I wanted to say something light, but instead I asked, do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Her mouth parted, then closed. She stared at the mug. All the time, she said quietly. We didn't speak for a long moment. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. She stood finally, carrying her mug to the sink. Can you hold this? She asked, handing me a small potted plant. I took it automatically while she cleared the table. The pot was warm from the sun. A few leaves trembled in the draft. When she turned back, she brushed soil from her fingers. Without thinking, she reached to steady the plant in my hands, her palm grazing the back of mine. Light, deliberate enough to feel. It was only a second, but the touch made the room feel smaller, like we were on the edge of something unnamed. She pulled back first. You can leave it by the window, she said softly. It does better with light. I set it down, my heart still drumming. Later, walking home, I tried to replay her words, her touch. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I started stopping by her apartment under the excuse of helping with small repairs. A squeaky door, a loose cabinet hinge. She didn't ask, but she didn't stop me either. That afternoon, the hallway smelled like fresh paint. She was kneeling on a sheet of newspaper, brushing white along the baseboard. You don't have to, she began when she saw me. I'm already here, I said, holding up a screwdriver. She exhaled, a half laugh, half sigh. Always already here. I crouched to tighten a loose handle on the closet. Our shoulders almost level. The smell of paint mixed with her perfume, something faint and citrusy. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't reach for it right away. When she finally did, she glanced at the screen, thumb hovered, then flipped it face down. You okay? I asked. She nodded, too quickly. Just my son. He asks questions. I didn't press. The screwdriver slipped in my hand. She steadied it, fingers brushing mine again, but this time she pulled back like it burned. Sorry, she said softly. It's fine. Silence swelled. She went back to painting, the brush strokes slower now. I tightened the last screw, but stayed crouched, watching her wrist move. Down the hall a door slammed. Someone's voice, one of the older tenants, called a greeting, then footsteps receded. She froze until the sound was gone. You should probably go, she murmured without looking at me. I hesitated. Do you want me to? Her brush paused mid-stroke. I don't know what I want. The room felt smaller again. I set the screwdriver on the floor. I can leave, I said. No. She caught herself, wiped a line of paint from her knuckle with a rag. Just give me a minute. I stood, pacing to the window. Outside, rain clouds pressed low over the park. My reflection in the glass looked younger, uncertain. Behind me, she rinsed the brush, water running too loud. You remind me of someone, she said over the noise. Who? She shook her head. Doesn't matter. I turned back. She was leaning against the sink, rag in one hand, hair falling loose over her face. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. My hand almost lifted to tuck the strand behind her ear, to do something, but I stopped halfway. She looked at my hand, then at me. A small intake of breath, like she was about to speak. The hallway door banged again. Someone coming back upstairs. The spell broke. She straightened, wiped her palms on the rag. You missed a screw, she said, her voice steady now. I lowered my hand, not sure if I'd imagined the whole moment. On my way out, she didn't say goodbye. Just a soft glance, like an unfinished sentence left hanging between us. We ended up walking together without planning it. She'd closed the shop early. I was leaving the laundromat next door. She saw me through the glass and nodded toward the park across the street. It was late afternoon. The benches were damp from an earlier drizzle, the air carrying that faint smell of wet bark. She walked slightly ahead, hands buried in her coat pockets. I kept a half step behind, unsure if I was invited or just tolerated. Long day? I asked. She shrugged. They're all long lately. We found an empty bench under a sycamore. She sat, smoothing her coat beneath her. I stayed standing for a beat, then sat too, close enough to feel the warmth from her arm, but not touching. She looked out at the playground where a few kids climbed the wet jungle gym. Do you ever feel like everyone's already chosen their lives? She asked. Sometimes, I said. I used to think I had time. She laughed once, quietly. Now my son tells me I'm impulsive. I think I'm just tired of being careful. The words landed heavy between us. I traced the groove of the bench with my finger. Is that why you invited me up? Her head turned slightly, but she didn't meet my eyes. I don't know why I did. Wind moved through the trees, scattering droplets onto our shoulders. She brushed one from her cheek with the back of her hand. I thought maybe you needed someone, I said, then wished I hadn't. Her breath caught. Don't, she whispered. I'm sorry. No, she exhaled. It's not you. It's me not knowing what I'm doing. She pulled her coat tighter. Her voice shifted, softer. You're too young to be orbiting someone like me. I tried to find a joke, but nothing came. You make me feel not invisible, I said instead. My cheeks warmed. She finally looked at me then, eyes narrowed like she was reading fine print. That's dangerous, she murmured. I stared at my shoes. Why? Because I'm not who you think. She turned back to the playground. I've made mistakes. Big ones. Silence. A crow landed nearby, shook rain from its feathers, flew off again. I'm not here to fix you, I said. A small sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. She covered it with her hand. God, you even say the right things. We sat like that, breathing. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, hesitated, then set it face down on the bench between us. He texted again, she said. Your son. Yeah. Wants to know who you are. She looked up, eyes bright but steady. I told him no one. I hate that I said that. I felt something rise in my chest. Anger, or maybe jealousy of a life I wasn't part of. Maybe I am no one, I said quietly. She turned sharply. Don't say that. We both stopped talking. The playground emptied. A single swing moved back and forth without a rider. Finally she spoke. I don't know what you want from me. I opened my mouth, closed it. I don't know either. She reached for her phone, but didn't pick it up. Instead, her hand hovered there, fingers trembling slightly. I keep thinking about that first day, I said. You folding the napkin. Her lips parted. I do too, she whispered. A long pause. The sky darkened to a blue-gray. Streetlights blinked on. I shifted closer. Not touching, but close enough for the air between us to warm. If I started then stopped. She turned to me fully now, eyes searching mine. Her hand lifted halfway, like she might brush my face, then faltered. For a moment, everything felt suspended. The wet wood of the bench, the hiss of distant traffic, her breath mixing with mine. Her hand dropped back to her lap. "What are we doing?" she asked, barely audible. I didn't answer. I didn't know if it was a question or an end. After the bench that night, something shifted. I didn't see her at the shop the next morning. Or the next. A younger barista told me Lena was handling stuff upstairs and left it at that. I tried not to read into it. I stayed at my usual table by the window, scrolling through nothing, watching the door. 2 days passed. 3. On the 4th day, I went upstairs under the pretext of fixing another hinge. Her door was shut. A strip of light showed at the bottom. I raised my hand to knock, then lowered it. Back in my apartment, the silence felt heavier. I opened my unsent texts, the one about living someone else's life, still waiting there, and typed, "Are you okay?" I stared at the blinking cursor, thumb hovering, then deleted it. That evening I saw her through the window across the courtyard. She was sitting at her table with another man, mid-50s, neat shirt, posture of someone who knew the place. They weren't touching, but they leaned toward each other in that easy way of old familiarity. A small spike of heat shot through me. Not anger exactly, but something jagged. I stepped back from the window before she could see me. The next day, I skipped the coffee shop. Wandered instead. Bought a book I didn't need. Read the first line 5 times without absorbing it. My phone stayed in my pocket, heavy. By the time I came back, an envelope was slid under my door. Plain, no name. Inside was my rent check, returned. A sticky note on top. "You've overpaid." Nothing else. I stared at the handwriting. I wanted to believe it was just about money. That night it rained hard. Water streamed down my window, blurring the courtyard. I thought of her hair damp under the sycamore tree, the way she'd said she was tired of being careful. I typed another message. Did I do something wrong? Deleted. Typed again. I miss our talks. Deleted. 2 days later, I finally went back to the shop. She was behind the counter, but different. Hair neatly tied, sleeves buttoned, expression unreadable. She gave me my coffee without looking up. "How's the plant?" she asked. Voice neutral, like she was asking about the weather. "Still alive," I said. "Good." Silence. She turned to wipe the espresso machine. I folded my napkin over and over until it was a hard little square. A man at the next table glanced at us, then at me, like he was trying to place something. Maybe a friend of hers. Maybe just curious. When I left, she didn't glance up. Back upstairs, I set the coffee on the counter and stared at the plant by the window. Its leaves drooped a little, soil dry. I poured water slowly until it overflowed the saucer. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I typed one last message. "If you need me, I'm here." My thumb hovered over send. Outside, a car honked. Someone shouted. The screen dimmed. I locked the phone and placed it face down. Didn't knock on her door. Didn't go back to the window. A week passed before I knocked. Evening light fell through the hallway windows, soft and gold. My heart thudded so loud it felt like it would echo off the walls. Her door opened on the chain again. She looked at me for a moment. No makeup, hair loose, sweater hanging off one shoulder. She didn't speak. My voice cracked. I wanted to bring the plant back. She unhooked the chain and stepped aside. "Come in." Her kitchen smelled of chamomile tea. The plant sat on the counter, leaves perked up from water. I held it out anyway. She took it gently, thumb brushing soil off the rim. "You've been gone," she said. "You too," I replied. She set the plant by the window. Neither of us sat. "I saw someone at your table," I said finally. "Across the courtyard." She turned. "An old friend." Nothing more. I nodded, but didn't feel relief, only a dull ache. "You didn't have to send the check back like that." Her lips pressed into a line. I was trying to make it easier to pull back. We stood there in the small kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car door slammed. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I do," she answered quietly. "Because I started something I don't know how to finish." I stared at my hands. I kept not sending messages, I admitted. I didn't know if you wanted me to stop. She reached for the kettle, then set it down without pouring. You remind me of how I felt when I was 20, she said. Before I learned to be afraid. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed a palm to her temple. And that scares me. Because you're kind. Because you're still open. I swallowed. You think I'll regret this? I think you deserve someone who isn't hiding. I'm not looking for perfect, I said. She laughed once, a dry, broken sound. And yet here we are. We were only a step apart now. Her hands rested on the counter edge, white-knuckled. I wanted to reach out, but the air between us was full of unsaid things. I don't know what I want, she whispered. You don't have to know, I said. Just don't pretend I don't matter. Her eyes closed, a slow blink. When she opened them, they were wet but steady. You matter, she said. The room felt smaller, warmer. She took a step closer. But this can't be a secret crush in a coffee shop, she murmured. It isn't, I said. Her hand lifted, hesitated in the space between us. For a heartbeat, I thought she would pull back again. Instead, she touched my arm. Light, almost nothing, but it landed heavier than any words. I'm tired of being careful, she said. But I don't want to hurt you. You're not hurting me, I whispered. A pause. The refrigerator hummed, stopped. Silence. She let out a shaky breath. So what do we do? I didn't have an answer. I just covered her hand with mine. Not a grab, not a claim. Just warmth against warmth. Her shoulders eased. She gave the smallest nod, as if she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Okay, she said softly. We stood like that for a long time, hands resting together on the counter. No plan, no grand declaration. Just two people acknowledging the space between them had changed. It's been 6 months since that night in her kitchen. The seasons turned without ceremony. Now it's late spring. The sycamore in the park leafed out in full green again. I still come to the coffee shop most mornings, but not always at 8:47 a.m. anymore. Sometimes later. Sometimes I stay upstairs helping her sort mail or repair something small. It's become less about excuses. She doesn't hide behind the counter as often. The younger barista runs the morning rush. Lena takes the quieter shift, wiping tables, refilling sugar, sliding me a flat white without asking. She always places it on a folded napkin, a triangle, an inside joke. We don't talk about what we are. We just are. A slow shifting of routines, like moving furniture an inch at a time until one day the whole room feels different. On Sundays, we walk through the park. Same bench under the sycamore. The kids on the playground have new coats now. She brings chamomile tea in a thermos. I bring black coffee in a paper cup. Sometimes we swap without mentioning it. Once, as we sat there, she said, I don't think I've been this steady in years. I asked, is that good? She smiled at the playground. It's real. At night, in her apartment, I'll fix a hinge or just stand in the kitchen while she brews tea. We move around each other easily. Her son knows me now. Came by once, measured me with his eyes, then relaxed. We don't push. There are still moments of hesitation. She'll reach for her phone and stop. I'll draft a message and delete it. But more often we just say things out loud before they turn into shadows. One rainy afternoon, I found her at the window, watching drops trail down the glass. She said quietly, I used to think I was done with beginnings. I handed her my coffee without a word. She took a sip and laughed softly. Too bitter, she said, and passed it back. Life hasn't turned into some movie montage. I still have my small apartment upstairs. She still keeps her books stacked on the floor. We still fold napkins and water the plant. But there's a warmth now, steady as the kettle's hum. Sometimes, when she locks up the shop and we walk across the street, she'll slip her hand into mine. Not a big gesture, just a quiet anchor. Last week at 8:47 a.m. exactly, I caught her looking at me over the counter, a smudge of coffee on her thumb. She tilted her head toward the park. No words. We both knew. We sat on the bench. The same swing moved without a rider. She poured tea into 2 mugs and handed me one. Do you ever feel like you're still living someone else's life? I asked, echoing my old, unsent text. She shook her head slowly. Not anymore, she said. A gust of wind carried the smell of wet bark. She brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her hand lingered just long enough for me to cover it with mine. We sat there like that. No plan, no declaration. Just the quiet recognition that whatever this was, we'd built it inch by inch. I don't know why this moment stayed with me, I said softly. Maybe because it feels like we finished the sentence. She squeezed my hand once. Maybe because we started a new one, she murmured. We watched the playground in silence, tea cooling in our mugs. A small, private understanding passed between us, something no one else would notice.